Hey, Baron Blumen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. It's working. All right. Never ending.
Yes, it is. I can't believe I'm doing this and not sitting out on the second day of black powder season. What is wrong with me?
Well, you know what? This is the whole thing. You said if everyone comes to line. Hi, everyone. We'll start in just a minute. Welcome. Persia, can you hear me?
I can, Tom. Good morning.
Okay, very good. Mike Sapone, can you hear me?
I think I'm listen only, Tom. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, Rob Glenn, can you hear me, Rob? Rob, I just sent you an audio pin to unlock your microphone. Check your email if you would, please. Dave, I see you, and Mike Sapone and Persia Hurley online. Thank you.
How you doing, partner? McKinney had to do it herself. Yeah. But the only thing she has to come.
I don't care. I'm just unplugged it.
Oh, okay, we can plug that in.
Yeah.
Unless you want to put her slide.
I can do that, because I don't know what will happen if I unplug that.
Yeah.
Really well. I think I want to breathe. I got to start this, but I want to. Great, Jay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, she has her little skill that she does. And I got to find it. It's called emergency. Actually, here, I made it easy.
Ah, you're too good.
I don't know how it happened. When I opened it up earlier, it was right in the middle.
Rob Glenn, can you hear me now? Rob, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Tom?
There, now I can hear you fine. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
We'll start in just a minute. Hope everything okay at home?
All good. Thank you.
All right, very good.
I'm going to get it.
Yeah, I'll save it to my desktop, and then she can come and do the safety brief as soon as she's ready.
Okay, I was going to forward her slide this year. I was going to forward her slide for.
Oh, all right. Hang on 1 second. Let me pull it.
No, you know, I mean, I can
Just use the mouse.
I can use the mouse or I can use the arrows here.
I hear you. All right, we're showing the slide. We're on. All right. Okay. All right, we're rocking.
Okay. Oh, thank you. And we'll be out your way to shorten. I know. You like to keep this over done fast.
No, that's fine. Morning, folks. We'll start in just a minute.
Hey, Chris, how's it going? Hey, how's it going? How are you? Good. Yeah, I saw a lot of heavy frost on the ground. You guys ready for it? Good morning.
We did our huge dry run on Friday. Yeah.
We call it a dry run, yeah.
We did a dry run. We spent every single plow, flying equipment. We're starting to do that this year. All out of the ship. So Friday, everybody ran their route.
Oh, wow. So you doing it? Yeah.
Oh, we did.
Wow. All the parade and everything? Yeah.
Everything dolphins about what happens in the city that
All the background.
all the
Everyone thinks we're great.
they pick up all that trash from the 250,000 people over the city.
Talking.
I'm good. I can talk to that.
Get back, relax.
How you been?
I'm doing well. Yeah.
How are you guys dealing with PG&E and
I can't tell you some things I can't.
SoCal, and so this is I'm my wife has senior contract rep in California. California. So I go out there, have lunch with Mark, and I go in to meet him. They go well. I gotta see that. He's like, hey, Mark said he's like a love guy. So we go in the room and he's like, man, I got some power. I get it. I've got a chance to down there. I don't have a good.
Yep.
I'm not gonna be on with them. I got to run. I appreciate it. You're never in.
I'll just give you another. Cause
Let me do that. You just look at me. Cause I got all my ports.
yeah, you got everything. Okay.
Is that okay? All right. Good.
Let me do a check here.
Check 1, 2. Ooh, that's perfect.
All right, shut it off.
You met it. You never know. You know what? I'm just gonna go. You know, go and sit here. You know what? Not just my bag.
Oh, okay.
My resource.
Okay, I got you. Oh, yeah, that's your grab. That's my grab.
In Qtrly, I don't have anything for. So what company do you with?
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Check, check. Okay, good morning, everyone. Let's grab a seat, and we can get started. First off, let me welcome everyone that took a train down or flew in or walked in. Appreciate everybody being here. Very important meeting. This is the annual meeting of the Sensitive Information Sharing Strategic Advisory Committee. Thank you. This is representatives from federal government, state government, and the private sector. The SISE is a cooperative effort and has a great future ahead of it as long as we stay together and continue to shape it as an advisory team. We have guests that are observing today. You're certainly welcome to chime in. There's a packet that it's kind of our draft we wanted the SISE committee to look at. We're going to have this professionally edited and put together as a summary of the efforts that have been produced with DHS in partnership with the private sector and states under the NIPP Resilience and Security Challenge Program. So it's kind of trying to capture that. So first, before we start, we have a safety message, and I want to introduce Jennifer McKinney from Edison Electric Institute. So Jennifer, after you.
Thank you. So good morning again, and welcome to EI. My job this morning is to give you an overview of our emergency procedures. In the event we are required to evacuate the building, there are 2 exits close to this conference room. The first exit is located to my left through the glass door and to the right. If you will follow the exit signs and ascend down the stairwell, this exit stairwell leads you behind our building onto D Street. The second exit stairwell is to the left of the receptionist desk and across from the ladies' room. This stairwell leads you onto the 7th Street side of the building. Once outside, please proceed to the designated assembly area, which is across 7th Street at the Temperance Memorial, where we will do a roll call. Please do not attempt to re-enter the building or use the elevator until you are instructed it is safe to do so. If a threat comes from the outside, we may ask you to shelter in place with EI staff so you do not go towards the danger. Your meeting host and our team of floor wardens will provide additional instructions if necessary. In case of an earthquake, like the one in August 2011, please take cover under a table, clasp your hands, and use them to cover and hold and protect your neck. We also have staff that have been trained in CPR and the use of an AED. There are 2 AEDs located on this floor. One is in our wellness room, which is to the left of our catering kitchen, and the other is located in the Michael Faraday conference room, which is to the right of the receptionist desk. And just by chance, if this meeting is not that interesting and you need an Advil or a Tylenol, we keep those handy at the receptionist desk too. Lastly, and most important, the locations of the restrooms. The men's room is located outside of the doors down the hallway, the first door on your right, and the ladies' room is to the left of the receptionist desk, the first door on your right. For your convenience, the restrooms are unlocked. And on behalf of the Internal Services Department, we hope that you enjoy your meeting, and if there's anything that we can do to make your stay more endurable, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you. Huh?
Thank you, Jennifer. We appreciate it. That's right. Just as an update, we had to change our remote access for this afternoon. So if you're dialing in remotely, we've got a new webinar link for this afternoon. We're going to run one, and we republished it this morning once we found out the building limitations. So can everybody hear me okay? I know in the room you can, so very good. So next up, we have a welcome message from Edison Electric Institute. Chris, thanks again for hosting this, and I think it's a wonderful facility. The audio is wonderful, and I just want to give you a chance to say welcome, and we'll do some introductions. Go ahead.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks everyone for coming far and wide. I know we've got a lot of people local here from the DC area, but I know some people came as far as I think Ohio is probably the furthest. So appreciate you coming in to visit here at EEI. Just want to reiterate our support and commitment to this process, to the All Hazards Consortium. We've been partnering with Tom and the All Hazards Consortium for about 6 or 7 years now. Started out with a lot of the fleet movement issues around fleets for Hurricane Sandy and some of the hurricanes after that, and they keep coming, so we keep engaging through that process. But you know, our commitment to this effort, this collaborative effort, is very strong. We hope that federal partners and the state partners are also as committed to it as we are. And we just appreciate everyone taking the time from their busy schedules to be here. I just wanted to just direct, my lawyers tell me I have to do this. There's an antitrust statement in front of you, or if it's not in front of you, it's to your left or right. Just take a glance at that, and I know that most of the folks here are not private sector folks. We're not going to be talking about pricing or anything like that, but just keep in mind that we do want to keep our antitrust guidelines and regulations in front of mind. We are committed to them. We try to start every meeting with them, and just keep those in mind as we have conversations in the room or outside the room. We appreciate it. Other than that, appreciate it, Tom.
Very good. Wanted to start off and do some introductions. So I'll start on the conference bridge first, and then we'll go into the room. So I'll call your name. Just introduce yourself and your organization. Dave Vanderbloemen.
Good morning, Tom. Dave Vanderbloemen, recently retired from Dominion Energy, now working or trying to assist still with the All Hazards Consortium to help anybody I can.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Carrie Hicks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carrie Hicks. I'm a senior data analyst at Duke Energy, and I've been with the All Hazards Consortium for about 2 years now.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie. Ken Buell.
Hi, Tom. Ken Buell, Department of Energy, Director of Emergency Response and ESF 12 lead.
Great. Thank you, Ken. Glad you could join us today. Mike Sapone.
Good morning, everyone. Mike Sapone from Eversource Energy. I'm the manager of emergency preparedness logistics and also a current co-chair of the fleet working group under the All Hazards Consortium umbrella.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. Persia Payne Hurley.
Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Persia Payne Hurley in North Carolina. I am the private sector manager and the business emergency operations center coordinator for the state, as well as the reentry administrator for our statewide reentry program. And I've been here for 5 years.
Okay. Thank you, Persia. Rob Glenn.
Hey, good morning. Rob Glenn, Private Sector Director for FEMA, also NBOC Director and the ESF 14 lead for FEMA. Thanks.
Okay, very good. There's a microphone in front of you. You have to push the face with the airwaves coming out of the mouth so it becomes red and your mic is hot. Otherwise, turn it off. So why don't we go down the room, Chris? We'll start here and just go down around the horn so they can hear you on the bridge.
Thanks. Again, Chris Eisenbray, Senior Director for Preparedness and Recovery Policy here at EEI. We handle a lot of the policy issues around storm recovery, natural disasters, those types of things.
My name is John Molnar. I'm the Director of the Program Management Office for the All Hazards Consortium.
Chris Geldart, I'm the current President of the Board for the All Hazards Consortium, and I'm the Director of Public Works for Washington, D.C.
Jim Caverly here to support Tom Moran.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Ken Kildow. I'm the Director of Business Continuity at Verizon and also the current co-chair of the SISE.
Good morning. I'm Laura Sheffis. I lead the Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council team here at EEI, and happy to be here.
Carly Gammon, FEMA Logistics, and I love electricity.
Hi, Doug Baker with FMI. We're a retail grocery trade association representing retailers and product manufacturers. I'm on the industry relations side and lead all of our technology and preparedness with Chad.
Chad Ross, Manager of Industry Relations at FMI. Bob Kolaski, run the National Risk Management Center at SISE and DHS.
Good morning, Kelly McKinney, Senior Director of Emergency Management, Enterprise Resilience, NYU Langone in New York, and the current Treasurer of the All Hazards Consortium.
Greg McShane, CISA. I now fall under the Integrated Operations Division, specifically the SIOC, CISA Integrated Operations Coordinating Center. I'm responsible for a lot of the technical facilities.
Jay Robinson. I'm the Program Manager for the Technology Development Deployment Program. I work for Director Kolaski.
Jim Nowak, Senior Director, Operations, Product and Services for ARCOS. I started with the All Hazard Consortium. I think, I was trying to remember, but it's been quite a few years, 2012 maybe. But I used to work for American Electric Power, and I've stayed on the team because I think it's a worthwhile project.
Did I miss anyone? Okay. Very good. All right, we got a brisk agenda today. In front of you should be a handout. It is for the Strategic Advisory Committee to kind of look at. It's a sample of what we will produce, professionally edited. It really is an outcome of the past 3 years in our partnership through the SISE with private sector, states, and the federal government. When we started writing it, we just couldn't believe how many things dovetailed into other things, right? It's kind of like, 6 degrees from everything. So you can take a look at that. That saves us hours of briefings and putting everybody to sleep. So the whole point of today is to really look at the past, present, and the future of the sensitive information sharing environment. This started as a vision many years ago in 2013, and has now matured, I think, wonderfully in a number of areas. So first up, it's the people. Bringing the people together and keeping them together is one of the hardest things for government and for the private sector. Elections disrupt, people move on and retire. It's just really hard. And having a stable body of people that have been with the consortium for years and now with the SISE is really important. So first up, I wanted you to hear from Chris Geldart. Chris has worn more hats in this organization than I think anybody, from public to private to public to private. So anyway, Chris, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm glad you at least have a picture of me with a tie on the screen. My apologies. Anybody in here a DC resident? We're collecting your leaves today for the first time. So we got crews, about 200 people going out into the street right now with a whole bunch of equipment. So early morning, and I got to get back out there to them. So I just want to say thank you to everybody in the room that's here to talk about where we are with the SISE, where we're going with the SISE, how that's fitting into the things that we've done through the consortium. You heard earlier folks on the different committees that have come up and gone down and come back up again. Really what this has been in my experience with the consortium, and I was here with Tom on day one when we were back in 2004, 2005, and John Molnar as well, of the consortium, what we were looking to try to do. And I think the SISE is really getting to the heart of what we were all thinking about back there, but couldn't think as clearly about it as you all are today. And that's, how do we share the right information with the right people at the right time, so all of our jobs, as we all are in the job, as Kelly would say, as you're in the job, it comes off better for you. Whether that better is quicker, stronger, faster, however you want to look at that, or more detailed, having the right people around for the right decision making, making the right things happen out in the field and around the country. That's really what this has been all about from the beginning. And the SISE just takes it so much further. Seeing us being able to stay integrated, help the folks at the NIC look at the NIPP as it was intended and help operationalize pieces of that, huge. Speaking as a former state director of emergency management, huge for us to be able to do that. And the people around this table, on the phone, and those that couldn't make it here are all part of that. So as we start to go forward and we think about what have we done, what are we doing today, and where do we look tomorrow, that vein of the important piece is the connectivity, the ability to do the job, and how we can partner with each other with the right information, the right time, to the right people to get the job done. That's kind of that underlying thing there. And the board got together earlier this year. Kelly was there, and Tom, and a bunch of other folks from the board talking about this. And many ideas and thought processes came up around an institute, which Tom will talk some more about, that y'all may have heard, and some different ways to further engage people and processes together to share information better. I just encourage you all, stay at the table, stay with us, give your thoughts, You know, Doug Baker came on into the organization here, and just the adding of the food side of things, just another whole area where right people, right time, talking with the right people. You may not have ever thought that, you know, electricity, food, yeah, okay, we need electricity to have the stores on, but there's so much more that goes to that. And so as you all are here the next couple of days, I just encourage you, please share your ideas, your thoughts, how we can make this organization better, and stay with us. So thank you again, Tom. Thank you, and John, for everything you're doing and getting this going and keeping it going. And really look forward to the output from here.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I asked Mike Sapone, the chair of the Fleet Response Working Group, to provide a couple of perspectives. Mike also was at that meeting in July. Mike, are you still with us?
I am.
Okay.
And again, this is the golden opportunity to bring together private and public sector representatives to work on real issues that we're really facing when it comes to the planning, the restoration, and the recovery aspects of emergency events. And I've been part of other groups that have tried this. It has not. It's never taken off. It's never gained the necessary traction to make things work. And the All Hazards and Fleet Working Group and all of the others and that are participating in the use cases are truly making a difference in bringing together the two powerful machines that are the private and public sector. And again, we're not just concentrating on electricity. I happen to be a little biased in that area, but I am learning an awful lot about my interdependencies on the other private sectors that are involved. So this is only going to grow from here. Chris couldn't have said it any better by saying, roll up your sleeves and over the next couple of days, take some of the groundwork that's been laid and build on it to the point where it doesn't matter if Mike Sapone gets a call from someone that says, hey, there's this guy, Chris Geldart in Washington that needs some assistance. And I say, man, I know Chris, great guy, expert in his field. Chris, what do you need? What we need to do is take those kinds of relationships and turn them into, legitimate processes and institutions, so to speak, so that, to your opening comments, Tom, so that these things survive the interpersonal relationships that are built and they turn into interdepartmental, intersector policies and procedures that are followed, so that anyone can pick up the playbook and understand how we're going to not only depend on one another, but how we're going to provide assistance to one another, even if it is just situational awareness that allows us to better position ourselves in the preparatory stage, the restoration stage, or the recovery stage. So there's finally a place to build this, and I can't thank EEI enough. They have been a huge supporter of this, Chris and his team and others that believe in this and the importance of it. Very, very happy to hear Dave Vanderbloemen's voice. Brings up just a immense amount of history and experience in our sector to this. So really happy that he's congratulate him for moving on, but really happy he's staying part of this team. That's really it for me. Excited to be a part of it. Wish I was there. Couldn't be. The only time you're busier than preparing for a storm or actually restoring a storm up here in the Northeast is the couple of days that follow. So really tied up here, but this is a high priority because it means everything when it comes to the next event.
Great. Thank you, Mike. And also our chair for the SISE work group is here, Kent Kildall. Kent, perspectives before we jump in? You certainly had a lot of influence over the process.
Well, first, Tom, thanks for bringing this group together. Obviously, a lot of great representation here. And I'd just like to reiterate a couple of things that we've already talked about and then build on them. First, the importance of public-private partnership, and also the importance of intersector partnership on the private side. We're seeing that more and more, most recently in California with some of the public safety power shutoffs, the importance of that collaboration. And the thing that we've been trying to work on from the SISE perspective is how do you take that and not only have the idea of collaboration, but you operationalize collaboration. And really that's where we start to see the impact on our collective ability to respond to emergencies and get our constituents, be it public sector, members of the community, or our customers, or that combination of the two, back to a normal operating environment or their normal lives as quickly as possible. And I think we've made a lot of great progress using this forum to do that, and see nothing but good things ahead as we continue those efforts. Tom?
Great. Thank you, Kent. So some of you may or may not know who the SISE Strategic Advisory Council is. So I put some of the names, some of you twice. Thank you, Greg. The big idea is to have, when we started this, I think Kelly, Chris, Mike Ambrosi were talking about, we need to meet periodically, state, federal. And at our first meeting we had right here at EEI in the conference room down the hall, and the one takeaway, Chris, I remember from that was Jeff Dorco and Rob Glenn at FEMA saying, you know what, you guys keep doing what you're doing. Don't try to organize federal government, okay? Stay focused with the states and stay focused on operational matters, because that's really where the rubber meets the road at the private sector. But you can see this is a great cross-section. Tom Farmer, I'm glad you're here. Tom is with the American Rail Association and also chaired the cross-sector coordinating council for quite some time, 5 years, about 5.5 years, right? And as a matter of fact, I was thinking of you in the final game of the World Series, and I said, I wonder if Tom's got any Nat stories yet. But anyway, for those of you who know Tom, he's a big baseball fan, as I am. So these are senior people. These are people that have impact, and SISE can be many things to many people, but we want to stay focused on the things that the advisory committee. So today we're going to talk about kind of what's happened. We want you to hear some operational, tangible results, and then we want to talk about kind of the step forward here as we go through the agenda. So session one is really going to look at what have been the realities of the results. You know, I talk with Jay Robinson frequently, and Jay and I are always talking about results. And in my seat, I get pulled in a lot of directions with great ideas and one-offs, and hey, what do you think? And it just keeps coming back to, my board's the same way, it's keep coming back to, let's build operational results. And I'll never forget John Shaner when he started the Fleet Response Working Group. I said, John, how are you going to decide what to work on? You're going to have all these ideas. And it's very simple, three things. He called it the three-legged stool. Either one, is it simple? I mean, it doesn't take an act of Congress or an election to make it happen. Two, are we going to get operational benefit from it? And three, can we show results in 90 days? Speed. And if you don't have speed, you lose volunteers. You lose their attention, especially executives. And so we've tried to stay to that model. So what we did, rather than hit you with PowerPoint slides, is the document in front of you is our compilation of what's been going on really since when, Jay? 2016, I think, right? Okay. And I will never forget the moment the announcement came out for the NIPP Challenge program, and I remember I was at the beach and my phone rang as Bob Kolosky. Remember that day? And Bob said, Tom, I just wanted to let you know the consortium's proposal has been accepted as one of our first awardees for the NIPP Challenge grant. And I was literally sitting on the beach. I was so excited to hear that, Bob, because we've all been chasing this thing for a long time, right? This public-private, how do you make it matter and make it relevant? And I just knew, building on the efforts that all of us, electric sector, EEI, the cross council, I knew this could happen. I just didn't sure how, right? But that's if you proceed knowing that's going to happen, sometimes it does. So at the end of the day, I just want to point out some areas of highlights within that. Partnerships are how things survive. Dave Vanderbloemen is with us today because he was with Dominion. He became a partner in the SISE. He retires and he says, Tom, I'd like to stay involved. How can I stay involved? And that speaks so loudly to many of the states, folks that leave, the federal and private leave, they want to stay involved. Probably the most significant one was with Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Alex Keenan can't be here today. He sent me a note this morning. But it was through them that we learned about a FEMA initiative where they started during Harvey basically a call center that anyone, Red Cross or fire or emergency management, could call in and get turn-by-turn directions around Houston, because they were mash up social media, state, local, DOT information. It's fantastic. And they updated it like every 5 minutes. Well, we hooked up with them, and now we're partnered with them. And every time they activate, we activate and send out a notice so that truck drivers, whether it's electrical or food or fuel, can get turn-by-turn directions in any major flooding event where roads close or open every 5 minutes. I mean, it's dynamic. Waters rise. Very significant operational partnership. And again, no one would have known about it had we not heard about it through DHS and FEMA, through a task order FEMA gave to, I guess, DOT to fix this, right? And of course, once we heard about it, then Chris and I worked on a guide, a training guide, a learning system, and had significant impact. I think the other piece too is this cross-sector coordination. Over the past 3 years, we've really stepped up food, fuel. We've partnered with PMAA. Sherry Stone can't be here this morning. She's going to call in this afternoon. Transportation, certainly Tom Farmer had a chance to chime into this from the rail perspective. The states are very interested in learning more about how to leverage the rail sector. But certainly electric comms, food, fuel, medical, and so forth. These people are now working together on use cases, which is really operationalizing, I think, what we've all been chasing for a long time. The policy we're going to talk about, Carrie Hicks is going to talk about. For decades, GIS has been a decision-making tool, but no one could tell what GIS data is more reliable than others. Okay? If you're looking at a map, you can't tell if that was updated last month, last week, or 2 hours ago. So the SISE work group said, we need a standard. Well, who does it? Nobody. Well, we're going to start it. So 11 companies and 6 states federated this ORL standard, which is going to be adopted across the country to decision makers that counts data. So there's 14 things on a checklist, and if that data rises to that, it's an ORL 1, 2, 3, or 4. So this is really a significant outcome. It wasn't a part of our scope, but it just came along the way as smart people get together. And now we're adopting that, or looking to adopt that into the NIC. Because I'll be darned, DHS has data, it doesn't have the same problem we do, right? How do you know what's more reliable than others, right? So we now have a standard. Carrie's going to talk about that in just a minute. Operationally, we certainly have perfected, I think, our regional common operating picture, working with GeoCollaborate, a $5 million tool NASA developed. It gives us a way to get 30, 40, even 50 states on board with hundreds of companies at the same instant on a few things: weather, transportation, declarations and waivers, and it supports resource movement across state lines. We get emails all the time after every storm from states, right? In the West now with the wildfires, hey, where'd you guys come up with it? This is fantastic, right? There's so much noise, people can't always hear about it. And then lastly, we've been able to adopt that ORL standard in some really unique decision-making dashboards for 30-second decision-making, right? This is the Fandango model. If you need A, you go to a dashboard for A. If you want to see movies, you go to Fandango, and you've got it in 30 seconds. What decision makers tell us is we have more data than we can possibly handle. We don't know what's reliable, and it's got to be organized in a way that I don't have to learn, right? So we've developed a series of these as a prototype, and we see this going forward to use for operations, to use for analytics, to use to validate data. We're going to be working with DHS to validate some of their data sets. So we're all working off the same standard and the same page, right? And then connecting the states into this as well. So this is all spelled out in the document, but the beauty of working with the states and the federal agencies is you get multiple perspectives on the same issue. And I wanted to make sure we pointed that out. Another one we did not expect is this whole digital outreach communication initiative. So this is an artificial intelligence-based system, and it reaches out through social media and pathways and connects people if they're interested, and then draws them in and educates them and moves them to action. I'll talk about that in a minute, but this is something that's been going on for quite some time. Chris Geldart told me, in DC, he spends all this money to put, placards on buses, and he really doesn't know how many people see the ad to stop smoking or go here. We did it for an opioid test in Maryland. In 5 days, we reached 11,800 citizens who opted in, watched a video about how opioid addiction happens, developed by some doctor from I don't know where, but it was fantastic. And then from there, they were able to go right to the county's website where they live, because it senses where you live. So if Carla's in Howard County, Maryland,
It puts you right to the web page of Howard County Health Department. You know what happens today? You go to the web page, and if you can last 20 minutes to find the page, right? Most people don't. Well, this routed them right to it. And I think out of the 11,400 of them reached the information. And this is a fantastic capability to outreach and educate anyone on anything. And it's now part of the SISE. We develop use case committees for lodging, fuel, routes, pre-staging, reduced fiber cuts. We've developed an online vetting process, which today is fully active. You'll hear about that as we speak. People are hearing about the SISE, they're opting in, and they start through a very simple process of education. Doesn't mean they're vetted yet, but we bring them in so we know who we're talking to. It filters out people from foreign countries. It filters out people that are just kind of, want to sell meals ready to eat and things like that. The vendor community, which I grew up in. A fantastic capability. And then we're really here to look at the sustainment and the sustainment model. And I think the idea of an applied operational research institute has great premise and a great promise, if you will, with the private sector. So that's the highlights of the document you're looking at. You're going to hear in a few minutes from Bob Koloski, Persia Payne-Hurley, and Carrie Hicks on some of the deeper dive and what are really the most significant part of this. But Bob has been a great partner to the SISE. It was kind of teed off under an S&T grant, but because of the NIPP challenge, we were able to build on top of that. And prior to that, we did the whole FEMA catastrophic planning grant program, Kelly. I don't know how many millions that was, but we built everything on top of each other, right? So what we came out of the FEMA catastrophic planning grant was a planning framework, a legal construct, right? We came out of the S&T thing with a SISE idea and environment. And what the NIPP gave the private sector was now resources to fund and finish that framework. So now it's alive and well. And I asked Bob to come and just talk about the NRMC. He's taken on the directorship of the NRMC. They're looking at ways to reduce risk and help their priorities. And I think the private sector needs to understand that and find a way they can feed or leverage into that. So, Bob, I just wanted to have you provide some comment. I really appreciate you coming today. And Bob Koloski. Bob?
Sure. Thanks, Tom. I will be brief. So it's good to be here, but I'm only here for an hour and 15 minutes or so I want to listen to other people talk rather than hear myself talk. I'm excited to see where you've been able to take this. The idea behind the NIPP Security and Resilience Challenge, which we came up with around the 2014-15 timeframe, was to use federal resources to maybe fill a gap to something that, when you have a little extra dollars will help make sure that people come together, show some level of federal support, and then get out of the way and let innovation happen. And this is a case where, putting a little money into the system and encouraging partnerships that have been established through the National Infrastructure Protection Plan to continue to work together and make something out of the partnership. Federal funds is all that was needed there because there was a lot of energy there and the ideas were here and you didn't need us to come up with the ideas, but if we could help out. So appreciate that, 3 or 4 years later, the level of interest has demonstrated that the federal money was well spent. At the National Risk Management Center, a couple of my sort of stump speech items are: we are a planning, analysis, and collaboration center that exists to bring together the public-private partnership with more intensity and operationalize the public-private partnership. Guess what? That's what you guys are doing right now. So we're doing that in other areas, in other risk areas. We do continue to be the analytic engine by which the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency assesses potential impacts from incidents that happen, cascading impacts, cross-sector impacts, and try to best understand how anything that happens will play out in the critical infrastructure space and where there are things at the national level we need to know about, where there are things at the regional level where we need to put as much information in place that where critical infrastructure is, what could happen to critical infrastructure if a threat, if a hazard manifests itself, what's the exposure and how will that play out across the system? And then again, what can the system as a whole do by bringing people together to solve problems, to put things back together in the face of an incident. So we've lived through the hurricane and flooding events, the fires with all of you over the last couple years, and we can see really the maturity of the whole of community, the whole of the critical infrastructure community to come together to problem solve, to better understand, to pull data, tools together. We're making our own investments on the ability to do that, but ultimately, it's not going to happen that, operation centers in the national capital region and giving briefs to people who live here. It's going to get that information down closer to people who can do something with that information. And so we continue to work toward building this. What you're doing here in SISE helps us. We learn from you and we take in that information, but hopefully we have information and things we can do to contribute to help problem solve in the face of disasters and anticipate and do planning. And so, very much aligned with the work we're doing in the National Risk Management Center. We were thrilled to partner with FEMA in the update of the doctrine, the National Response Framework, and the establishment of Emergency Support Function 14, cross-sector business and infrastructure collaboration. And I know Rob's on the phone and work closely with Rob and Jeff Dorco and the colleagues at the NIPP. But what we're doing there is we put into place doctrine that further encourages these sorts of partnerships, this sort of capability, this sort of way of thinking to happen. And again, those of you and most of you in this room, are familiar enough with emergency management doctrine. Doctrine becomes reality over time, and having this capability, I think, will only help continue to push forward the incentives to continue to develop. So Tom, I hope that's a little bit of an overview of what we're going on. Again, excited to listen and hear how this is going. And Jay and Greg will be here all day, and look forward to getting a brief out. Thanks.
Any questions for Bob and the NRMC and where it goes, or where it's going forward? Go ahead, Kelly.
Well, I don't know if it's appropriate, Bob, but I saw the name of your agency in a document that FEMA released last week with this brand new ESF 14. They've charged CISA with being the lead agency for that. I don't get any thoughts about that, but to me, there's a real parallel with this idea. It's named, what is it? Private sector cross-sectional.
Cross-sector basic infrastructure.
Yeah, isn't that sort of what we're talking about here?
Very much so, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of doctrinal catch-up. ESF 14 came out of the experiences that we had, and Tom was certainly helping out in 2017 through the three major hurricanes plus other things that are going on. And we recognized a couple of things. We recognized that we didn't have the right touch points built into the incident management structure to take analysis in about infrastructure and use that analysis to influence the FEMA administrators' decision-making and across the integrated decision-making. So one thing ESF 14 does is connect analysis to decision processes, particularly around community lifeline functions, which also came out of the 2017 hurricane season and the NRF updates. The second thing we realized is that if we set up venues, and Tom Farmer was certainly involved in this, if we set up venues for the private sector to come in at the beginning across the infrastructure sectors and sit at the table and share information, but also be part of the sort of incident response structure, better things are going to happen. Prior to 2017 and the establishment of the ESF 14, it was hit or miss to the degree to which we were able to bring the private sector and the infrastructure owner-operator communities into the incident response structure. ESF 14, a simple manifestation of that is, we talk about bringing all the sector leads into the NRCC 45 days after the hurricane season started in 2017. Every hurricane subsequent to that, but for the flooding, 2018, 2019, coming in as the hurricane's about to make landfall. Sometimes it turns out that there's not as much to do, but it's good to have that process in. And then the final area, it connects the logistics area to infrastructure, and the final element of the ESF 14 again that pulls through to the NRF, et cetera, is recognize that infrastructure restoration is necessary for life safety and life sustaining capabilities, and it can't start happening after we've taken care of the life safety and life sustaining mission. Mm-hmm. Instead, we've got to get the infrastructure restoration prioritized from the get-go, because if you can get the infrastructure back up and running, you're going to save lives, you're going to change the facts on the ground. All of that, there's a reason that it all sounds the same thing that you've been preaching for years. We've all been talking together for years. And so, if we can put it in doctrine, you can innovate, we can operationalize, wonderful things happen.
So for me, and forgive me, Tom, but I was struck by our our esteemed colleague, Mr. Geldart, who is so incredibly tactical today. I don't know if you, for the folks on the phone, I mean, you see he's got those assault boots on and stuff, but but it's striking to me because we talk about operations and everybody kicks around the term operations. What's operations? Well, 200 men and women on the ground picking up leaves is an operation. Okay, that's an operation. Why? Because you had leaves in your front yard, and when you went to work in the morning, you come back at night and there's no leaves. That's an operation. Okay, so how does that happen? It happens because Chris is like the busiest guy we know. And 6 months ago, he gets a phone call, probably on a Saturday, and somebody said, "Hey, Mayor's got a pet peeve about leaves." And Chris was like, "What do you mean a pet peeve about leaves?" And they're like, "Mayor wants to he wants you to get rid of leaves, right?" And thus an operation is born, right? And so
Hold it. You got to remember, I asked the question, is it a pet peeve or a priority?
Right.
A pet peeve, that's nice. A priority comes with funding, and then maybe we can do something.
Right.
Right.
But the key to this is, if you want to understand operations, and I know everyone on the phone and in the room does, but so the mayor can want leaves picked up, okay? But if people think, and this is my pet peeve, by the way, people think that an executive can say, thus it make it so the leaves shall be gone, right? And then the next thing, you wake up the next morning and poof, it's magic. Well, no, it actually doesn't work like that, right? Chris had to go and he had to start a series of conversations, and the question is, how many conversations do I have to have layered with money, and how many problems do I have to solve before I got 200 people that leave work on Friday knowing that Monday morning they got a different job and they know where they're going to go and they know what they're going to do, okay? And the answer is, it's a million conversations. It's like a million. Probably not a million, but it's a lot of conversations, right? That's an operation. That's an operation, okay? So it's one thing to do it in a blue sky that's a single agency situation, and it's hard. It's not easy, especially when Chris is doing all the other things that he does. So take that example, and Bob was talking about it. Talk about infrastructure restoration in a place that's been devastated by a hurricane, okay? The complexities are enormous, and the main complexity is that you're taking a lot of different organizations that were the week before in competition, and you're trying to get them to work together. That's the number one thing. And that's the biggest problem in this nation right now, is as strong as we are and as rich as we are, those silo walls are getting harder and harder and harder. And so it's striking our ability to come together cross-sectionally and conduct an operation is almost nil in many cases. It's so incredibly difficult. The SISE is the first step, because if you can't talk, nothing's happening. Nothing. And I've been in this business a long time, and the biggest hurdle you have is that people are like, no, don't share that. Don't talk about that. Either, and it's a knee jerk a lot of cases. I mean, this is why 9/11 happened, because all these agencies that had a common mission weren't talking to each other. And that's the problem. So the last thing I'll say is, FEMA's talking about this new ESF 14. And it's great. And they talk about the what. FEMA's great to tell you the what. It's about the how. How are you going to do it? How is it that the mayor had a pet peeve about leaves, and now there's leaves getting picked up? How? Well, this is the how. It's all about this coordination piece. Mm-hmm. And when I start talking about coordination, people's eyes glaze over, because it's like insurance. It's the most boring term you can talk about. But you gotta share information, you gotta share resources, and you gotta solve problems as a team. And you have to bring people together that aren't used to working together to do that. You try to do that in the middle of a disaster, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So that's what this All Hazards Consortium is all about. Is to bring those teams together before the disaster, so that get rid of all the plausible deniability, just to hardwire those communication pathways, put those problems into place. They know how to work together to solve problems,
And you know, the bigger we can build it, the better off these outcomes are going to be in the job. So because we can figure out how to conduct operations on the ground, because that's really all people care about. You know, are you picking up my leaves, right? You fixing my house? A yes or no? It's a yes or no. It's a pass fail, right? As Chris says. Right.
Anybody want to go after that? Very good. Going forward, one of the pieces that I want to make sure the SISE advisory council understood is we're going to be working very shortly. We flew out to Idaho and we're working with Idaho National Labs. So the SISE through DHS is going to be working directly with them. We had a great meeting with them, and lo and behold, we found out they have the same problem that a lot of people have. They have great people, great technology, a lot of stuff, and they can't figure out how to get people to use it. It's not operationalized yet. And we've learned over time, you got to find the problem that's the priority, and you have to align the people with the problem, and then you bring in the toys. Then you bring in the technology, right? It's so easy to bring in the technology first, but everybody does that. The noise is so loud, you can't tell what's good, you'd have no idea. So the approach the private sector's taking, let's find a problem, let's get everybody around that problem. Oh, by the way, there's something at INL we can use tomorrow, right? And they have a tool which is right square down the line for us. It does interdependencies across sector. They just don't need data in there outside of the water sector. So we came back from Idaho Labs. So this is kind of our next step, is to work with the NRMC, with DHS, and look at how we can validate DHS data. We can bring the ORL in there, but maybe look at this tool as a way of giving you a visual indication of here's power, telecom, road, all in one piece. How is rail impacted? You with me? All in one area. Maybe not the whole nation, but maybe in the panhandle of Florida where we're trying to reduce fiber cuts, this would give us a visual indication of the infrastructure that's there, and we can actually populate that with real private sector data. Or, as somebody said, I'm not going to give you the location of my building, but I'll put you within 300 feet. Okay, cover that. I don't know, they called it a mask data. So it's one county away, or it's not exactly the right thing. Bob, comment.
Yeah, can I throw a challenge as you talk about the future? One of the things, as we established the National Risk Management Center and took over the NESAC portfolio, the National Infrastructure Simulation Analysis Center portfolio, which is historical portfolio of lab funding to support infrastructure decision making. One of the things I'm trying to do is build out a transition to use model and think through the business model around transition to use. So when we invest in something like the Cascade tool and INL builds it, I don't think the right business model is every community, every UOSI around the country go to INL and contract for this tool and build it. I don't think that the costs work. You know, the UOSIs don't necessarily have the money to do that, and you guys know this better than I do. But what's the right way to get the tool into the hands of somebody who can then commercialize it in some way, and what's the right way for consortia like you or public sector to then make it useful? So I think there's a missing gap. So as you go through the process, I think we're still on the stage that we'd like to partner and pilot kind of transition to use capabilities. And there might be an opportunity here to do that through some of the funding. But I only want to do that if we know that there's comes to an eventual sustainment model, that we don't want to ask UOSIs and consortia to be contracting with national labs. There has to be something in the middle. You all are business people. So any ideas you have as you go through the process would be appreciated, because I think there's some thinking we're putting toward that, but I'd like to learn through some transition.
So there may be another piece in that can be useful too for entities like this, is looking at what does a market research look around something that we need information from, or we need a system to do. Because I've seen a lot over the years of a recreation of things that exist by the labs, because it's easier to get money to labs to do it than to go to the commercial side of things. So how to bridge that as well, because there's a lot of good companies out there. You know, Esri's one, there's a bunch of other ones that have tools and things out there that exist, and I see a lot of recreation happening at the lab. So that part would be great for groups like this to work on too.
Yeah, and we'll stay in contact on this. We're actually funding through a Department of Commerce special contracting authority. We're funding some work to think about that. We can push the labs to what they do well and then push more into the marketplace is really a goal of mine.
Yeah.
But I think the thing think that the missing piece is that we have to create a demand for these tools, right? And because the tool is, I think, uniquely effective in that environment, in a pre-Hurricane Michael environment, or immediately post, PS environment, right? That's going on in California after you've got these devastated areas, but you don't realize the utility of the tool until you're in the middle of the job, right? And so bringing these cross-sectional groups together, like an ESF 14, and throwing them into that scenario and creating a demand for that tool, and then using the tool, that's the way to build the capability of the tool. That's the way to build the capability of people to use the tool. But overall creates a demand. I mean, Tom, you talked about regional catastrophic planning grant. We spent $28 million. We built some fantastic tools, but then this fear of the catastrophe faded, and they're all sitting on a shelf and they're not being used. And so I think we have to rekindle the fear of these big incidents, and then convene these cross-sectional teams and recreate a demand for the tools and get the tools to be used. That's how you keep a tool alive, right? Is you use it.
Well, and a great point, and I've learned after working with the private sector, is it really isn't the tool. They have more tools than you can imagine. It's what problem is that solving, and if you connect that to me, I'm in for life. Okay, and it's how we say that, right? You've got researchers and operators talking, and there's a big gap sometimes. But boy, if you can find that itch and you scratch it, they're all in. And I think that's part of the work. It's half marketing, it's half science, it's half facilitate. There's kind of this weird combination, and that has to be sustained. You can't have that coming and going. That's the part. You have to keep that band of brothers and sisters together on this problem. That's why we went to use cases, and they just hunkered down, and they're all in. And the ones that aren't interested in bananas don't fall asleep. They don't even show up. And great. We'll get to their topic. So that use case approach was like magic. So Bob, what I took from this is maybe we discussed looking at a transition to use committee of some kind and look at. But I can tell you, INL's product, the Cascade product, we did a webinar, Ken. I wasn't sure you were on that one on a Friday. Okay. We did a webinar with the electric utilities, and Mike Sapone saw that and said, that's a game changer. He said, we would love to know where infrastructure is, and if we had a place that was secure, that we could trust, that we could visually have our managers see what's going on and how it would impact fuel and comms and other things all in one picture. He said that would be really a big thing. So takeaway I'm looking at here from notes is maybe we look at setting up a committee just to do that. So we'll offer the opportunity for anyone that wants to
and
sit
if
in
you
on that
see
one.
barriers that come through, either it's too expensive or there's data things, or you can't port tool from here to here, or please just identify those barriers and all that, because again, I think that's where we can sort of fit in and break down the barriers so that when there is a market for it, there's not a barrier that keeps the market from taking advantage of it. Because I think there are markets for these. You can get the market dynamics correct here.
I agree. It's like everything else. Connect the product to the demand.
Right. Well, and I think as one of our founders, John Contestable, told me for years, the idea is to connect dots, don't become a dot, because then you compete with all the other dots. And I never forgot that. Laura, question.
Well, in the spirit of not letting the ESCC be a dot in this fascinating and useful debate, I'll mention that our Research and Development Committee with CEO leadership, I think we were sitting in our own conference room here at EEI about a year ago and saw the same landscape that Bob and Tom and others have described. There are labs and there are good, smart people there, and they have a lot of cool stuff, but our sense is that they are not connecting purposefully enough with utilities. So we created a meeting, and at first we called it Lab Shark Tank, but I didn't think that was very CEO friendly, so it became the Lab Round Table, kind of like coordinating. Oh no, another round table. But it was a huge hit in terms of bringing labs out. We got 10 of the 17 DOE labs, and we had, I would say, 8 to 10 major utilities across the country. And so a small step, but we did achieve connections and identification of the need to go back again and bring the labs out and chip away at duplication. So to the extent that we can coordinate our efforts, because our CEO said, do that again at a lab, get more people there, keep that conversation going. To the extent we can join our dots with your dots, we want to do that.
Wonderful. Great. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. A couple of takeaways then. We'll look at a transition committee. Certainly, Laura will be talking about how we leverage that. And I think the trick that I've seen in 16 years is alignment. You find the problem in the private sector. I say the private sector only because that's where the scaling comes from, okay? And then you build the people around that, and then you bring the toy or the solution into that, and it works every time. And then you can scale that, you can market that, you can have somebody adopt that. It's very, very important. Excellent. No other questions for Bob? Okay. I think we got a couple actions out of that, John. Okay, Bob, you can stay as long as I know you've got to, however you want to do it, okay? Speaking of operations, Persia Payne Hurley and I met years ago. And if you haven't met Persia, she is the private sector liaison in North Carolina. Persia, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can, Tom.
Okay. So Persia is high energy. She works for Mike Sprayberry, the director of North Carolina Emergency Management. And when Mike hired her, I'll never forget this story. He said, okay, Persia, I want you to work with the private sector. Just don't get me in legal trouble. Go forth and conquer, right? He called a meeting, and I guess he had 30 or 40 people in there. And this is Persia's first day. She's a logistician out of the military and brings that kind of organized mind. Well, Persia and I talked about, we really need to connect the Fleet Working Group. Mike Zapone, the chair of the Fleet Working Group, was talking about connecting closer to state private sector liaisons. So in January of 2019, Persia started a committee within the SISE of her counterparts in Florida, Virginia, Maryland, D.C., Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. This committee meets every Tuesday like clockwork, 2:30, and it's the funniest thing how they've worked together. They've mentored each other. We've got seniors, we've got freshmen, and they're all over the map. Some are really moving forward with the private sector. Some are just getting their feet wet. Some are fighting internal cultures that, we've never done that before versus, man, it can happen. Look what's going on down here. Right. So all this stuff. So I asked Persia just to give you, again, back to the people. It's the people that make the sites work, right? And when you have those folks come together, I asked Persia just to give you an update from operations, because she's all operational. I'd laugh when you hear about raking the leaves. That was a funny story. I know, Persia, you'll get a trick on that. So anyway, Persia, I just wanted to give the Sites Advisory Council just an update on the committee and what it's done and where you think it's going to help.
Well, hey, thanks, Tom. Gosh, it doesn't seem as if I need to really go any further from what you've told these guys about. You've warmed up the council pretty good. Just want to talk briefly, guys, about this this mentoring that we've been doing across the 6 states that are now in the private sector liaison committee. It's been really a great exchange. I mean, from what the different states are doing, the problems as Tom mentioned, challenges and that kind of thing, we've been able to sort of try to get it down to a common denominator of what people need, because ultimately it's states helping states really to step up to the levels necessary to make true partnerships with the private sector happen. And that's a big challenge for a lot of the states. So from information sharing and supporting the continuation of business to amplifying messages for each other for the widest distribution, we've been able to take some baby steps in some areas and big steps in others. So the mentoring piece has been huge. Without a formal training program right now out there, this has been a good forum to train new private sector liaisons, at least so far, and then, get out some good initiatives. The Regional Web EOC initiative, that's the one that I'm going to mention primarily. These are Web EOC boards that were designed here in North Carolina. I'm thrilled to be the one to get that started. We're trying to spread that across the states so that private sector would have access to Web EOC primarily, also have access to assets boards and tracking systems, and just really to be able to get as much information out of the Web EOC system as possible and in real time with all of the other state agencies, National Guard, Highway Patrol, DOT,
forestry, you name it, for real collaboration in a disaster, and that's more of a response focused initiative. But the use cases that we work on, like reducing fiber cuts or regional pre-staging, I mean, we're looking at what we need to do to customize either physical BUSCs or BRCs, and create critical infrastructure programs that are year-round, creating cultures of partnerships, collaboration, problem solving, and ultimately increase resilience in all the areas of emergency management for the state's preparedness, response, recovery, mitigation. So expanding the capacity across even just this small group has made a real impact in the way that they deal with private sector entities and how they want to expand their programs. So I'm excited about it, and as you can see there, the benefits that we talked about, obviously there are blue sky. I mean, this is a 24-hour operation. Decisions made to the state are not just made during disasters or just before a hurricane hits. It's 24 hours. It's all the time. It's continuing. And so these conversations have to be there, and these liaisons have a voice in the EOC. That's what Mike likes to call it here, a voice in the EOC to keep that private sector part of the conversation going. So I'm going to stop there. The rest is kind of up on this great slide that Tom made, but I think you guys get the gist, and happy to take some questions from you, suggestions, whatever you think that we should be doing or expanding.
So just high level, this goes back to the operational side. The private sector has to work with the states operationally when it hits the fan, right? That just doesn't happen if they're not meeting blue sky. This is part of the relational thing. And we've had a number of calls, but I remember we had 3 or 4 states on, and Tom Farmer joined that call, right, on the rail sector. Remember that? And Florida was on a couple of others, right? And of course, we captured the notes from all this stuff, and it just was reminding me about how hard it is to work with multiple states operationally, right? And so Mike Sapone said, we need to build this connection with these states so that we can get things quicker to them and things back from them, and we actually can fix some of these problems. And lo and behold, that has become a thing now, right? These folks are with us all the time. They want to circle back and look at, like Beverly Byards from Florida, Tom, after that phone call with you, she said, I never really thought about the rail sector as a massive tool, right? But you can't call them up Friday, hey, Tom, I need something Saturday. It's not going to happen overnight. But they never thought about that. And I remember during 9/11, we had generators sitting on flatbeds. I don't think they ever got used because of miscommunications between federal agencies and mortgages. It's crazy. Stuff happens. So the whole point was, Persia and I spoke, is one of the initiatives that her boss, Mike Sperry, would like the Institute to look at is how do we create more programs like North Carolina that are truly interactive operationally, right? Through WebEOC, like a tool they can get instant information, but also through training and education. So does anyone have any questions or comments for Persia? They're still coming up. They haven't been at this a year yet, and they've already worked some pretty big issues already. Kelly.
I just, I keep jumping on my soapbox, but, before I said that, the SISE is really the how for disaster response. I think it's one of the biggest challenges we have as a nation is our ability to break those silo walls down. And to me, the biggest and most challenging and our Achilles heel as a nation is those state borders, those silo walls between those states. I mean, the states, FEMA will tell you this, the states have the primary responsibility for disaster response, right? They're sovereign states. We have EMAC, they work together across, but EMAC is, it's a great program. It's too slow. It's too slow for a catastrophic incident. And I've had a lot of experience in the Regional Catastrophic Planning Grant Program, breaking those state walls down. There's enormous benefits to that. So this, I just can't tell you how important I think what Persia is doing is, and to have, I know Persia, somebody said, described her as like a force of nature. It takes that energy and it takes those people skills to bring it together and keep that momentum up. This is a best practice. This is the kind of thing that we have to grow. And I do think those states are key because they are, you know, they seem like every hurricane season they're in play, but we got to grow it everywhere. Maybe we can just get Persia to do it, you know, with the 48 down here. And but I just think it's such a great program.
Second that.
Very good. The other piece too that we're working on here is I'll put it up on the whiteboard. Is Jeff Dorco at FEMA Logistics drew on a napkin his vision for how this really should happen. So you have the states, bottom right, have WebEOC. They do all their work on. We found out it was one call with Persia. Kent was trying to figure out how to reduce fiber cuts, and Persia's sitting on the call going, you know, I think I might have an idea for that. We issue a work order to our debris removal crews. Why don't we send you a copy of that? Has the name, rank, serial number, the phone number, the POC, so Kent and Verizon know where the cut's going to happen, right? And then they can coordinate. So we haven't worked it out yet, but this is how quickly you know. So the idea then was use the SISE as a legal connection for the private sector to pull in by use case, but then also use that to connect through the NIPP to FEMA Logistics to watch what's going on directly or indirectly, maybe through DOE or DOT. All the SISE does is channel the information legally faster than the attorneys within the federal agencies can make it happen. I mean, this isn't a technical issue. This is a people issue, okay? Technically, this could be done tomorrow, but you've got all these other factors. And I think from the private sector side, Ken, I'll let you speak to this. It's protecting that data, right? The fiber information is not something you're just going to hand out to a website, I think it is. Yeah.
So it's always one of the fundamental challenges we get into with data rate.
And can you move closer to the mic? Sorry, they can't hear you. Thank you.
It's always one of the fundamental challenges that we have as a company when we get data requests to look at, you know, forward-looking risk assessments or you know, information sharing like this. Who's going to have access to the data? How's that data going to be protected going forward, and how is it going to be used? Because we, you know, are looking forward to sharing more data, but don't want to hear about it in public hearings 6 months later. And so that's one of the things that we continue to work on as part of the SISE, and I think we've got some momentum on that. And but it's going to continue to be one of the things that we'll have to work on as an organization to make sure that we find the right balance, so that we can make everyone comfortable sharing more information and getting to that collaborative approach to things.
So any questions for Persia's committee from the state perspective? I want to invite some of the folks on the webinar here as well. Ken Buell, any comments or input?
No, Tom, thank you.
Okay. Mike Sapone?
No, the only comment is I definitely look forward to working more with Persia and her ideas and her why not attitude, which was you know, you can't beat a why not attitude.
Okay, thank you. Anyone in the room, comments, input for Persia's committee?
Hey, Tom, this is Rob.
Oh, hey, Rob. There you are. I didn't see you on the webinar list, but now you're back. Good. Comments?
Okay. Yeah, just a couple things. One, obviously, always appreciate Persia's point of view. And certainly I think that the whole notion of potentially using WebEOC makes a ton of sense. Over the next year, you know, I think that from the FEMA standpoint, we're going to really be looking at how do we develop, you know, a baseline of what exactly a private sector program, private-public coordination program looks like. How do you mature it? And working with the National Integration Center along those lines. So, you know, right now it's so many different views of what that looks like. And they're not all going to look like ESF 14, and they're not all going to look like a BEOC. So, you know, definitely look forward to getting input from, you know, Persia and the group through AHC and the SISE, but also wanted to kind of provide that, to Kelly's point, you know, how do we, you know, cut across the state lines with some level of certainty would certainly be helpful for everybody.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Rob.
Sounds good, Rob. Sounds good.
Okay.
Tom, I'll just throw in a last comment. we see this as so important that during the first half of the year, we actually trained about 200 of our internal people to learn how to act as liaisons to state and county level EOCs, because there's a difference between your day job, you being a state government affairs person, or an account representative, or a field operations person, and being a liaison in the EOC. So we invested the time and energy to train those people, and I think we're seeing some of the benefit of that after Dorian, where we increased our presence in both state and county EOCs, and I think Persia is on the right path to continue to formalize those relationships and put the tools behind them as well. So it's a great focus area for this community as we go forward. Tom?
Okay. And Tom, just if I may, I think that you point to what Verizon's doing, and that, what's happening in California, I think is speaks to that, right? I mean, we've all seen the public safety power shutoffs that happened 2 weeks ago. I don't think there's any going on right now. They at one point, I think they had 895,000 customers out, 2.3 million people, and it was mandated by law. State law said, if you have these certain weather forecasts, you're gonna turn the power off. And so that was the what, but the how was not handled well. And so the way PG&E rolled it out, they didn't have those kinds of connections that Kent's talking about. They did not have the people in the local EOCs. They were not communicating well in advance, and they weren't sharing information. And to make matters worse, the day before it happened, their website crashed, right, when people tried to get information about, am I going to be out? That was probably the biggest problem. But the governor's beating the hell out of them. I mean, the words are, he's using some, I think he used some expletives, not as bad as what the president tweeted this weekend, but they're pretty bad. I mean, they're bad. So, but that's the difference, I think, it's about the how. How do you do it? And if Verizon had to shut its service off, if they were communicating in advance, what does it mean and what do you do? And, that the outcomes are a lot better in the job.
Okay. So from the ESCC point of view, and we are incorporating wildfires into our all hazards approach in 2020. So I'm obviously keenly interested in great ways for the how to happen. But then I just want to note for the preceding notes, the lawyer in me, which I try to keep in a box, but I'm leading a group of industry lawyers through an information sharing concept exercise over at DOE. And so to the extent that we could come in and learn from the napkin diagram, I would appreciate the chance to do that.
Laura, do you mind just taking 2 minutes to give the folks a sense of what ESCC stands for is? Because I'm not sure a lot of people are as familiar as maybe you and I.
Sure. So, many years ago, I would have gone to some of Tom Farmer's meetings when we were the cross-sector meetings. The Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council was stood up and formalized under CPAC in 2013. It's a little bit unique across the 16 critical infrastructure sectors in that it's led by 30 CEOs, and they represent every business model that we have: electric co-ops, investor-owned utilities, and public power. So they meet with DOE, DHS, FBI, Department of Defense formally 2 to 3 times a year to share information and set out high-level joint industry government strategies. The other 350 days of the year, senior staff from many more than 30 utilities across the country are working on projects that make us better, smarter, faster for disaster day. So there's a huge focus on cyber, but as I mentioned, we're all hazards. So we did a lot of work. We were born really to become more formal out of Sandy. and we did a ton of work in the 2017 hurricane cycle. So I'm here because I'm a Tom Moran fan and a Persia fan, but our CEOs have pushed us to recognize we've got this bridge, federal industry, that's built out pretty well. It's tested fairly frequently. What do we do to dive into the states and recognize the dynamic that someone mentioned? Disasters happen in states. Governors lead response. As an industry, we're good at that, but we want to be better for the multi-state regional cyber attack day.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Any other comments or input? Okay. So going forward, this group is working on, again, use cases, focus. Tomorrow, they're working on Persia, and Laura actually hooked up on responding to a cyber attack post-attack, right of boom. And the scenario is a hurricane, attack on the election, social media unrest, panic, and then an actual attack on the electric grid. Whole purpose of this exercise, as we're designing it, is to build a directory of all the people in a state that would handle social media threats, cyber threats, and disaster response. And Persia has really done a lot with Laura to put that together. So, and I think Persia really is looking at how do we better connect with each other as a BEOC, as a state community, right? Because they're all different levels. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Yeah, very good. Okay, Persia, thank you very much. I want to jump ahead. Next is Carrie Hicks from Duke Energy's on. This group has, I guess, one of the fastest starts of any committee is our GIS committee under the SISE. They produced 9 products in 7 or 8 months. Amazing. This is important from decision-making standpoint. And I wanted Carrie just to talk about the committee. Chris McIntosh, there you are. I saw Chris come in. Carrie's the chair. Chris is the co-chair. So Carrie, let me hand it over to you for some comment on the committee and kind of where you see it going.
All right, great. Thank you, Tom. Can you all hear me all right?
Yep, you're good.
Good. All right, so my name is Carrie Hicks, and like I mentioned earlier, I'm a data analyst at Duke Energy in Cincinnati, Ohio. I've been working at Duke for a little over 5 years, and I actually got involved with the All Hazards Consortium a couple years ago. And at that time, this concept of the operational readiness levels was kind of floating around, and it actually came out of ESIP, or the Federation of Earth Science Information Partners. The overall model, in short, establishes the operational readiness of a data set on a scale of 1, which is fully operational, to 4, which would be quote-unquote non-operational. That doesn't mean that you can't use the data set. It just means that we wouldn't consider it operationally ready under certain use cases. So it was inspired actually by the technology readiness levels, which come out of NASA, and those rank the technological readiness of a component of technology on a scale of 1 to 9. So because of our interface with the Earth Science Information Partners, we caught wind of this idea, and for me personally, it really resonated with me due to the role that GIS plays in the utility sector. We often interface with decision makers who are more in the operations space, and our two worlds tend to speak very different languages. We've run into the challenge of communicating data readiness to non-GIS people in a way that is easy to understand and standardized. So the GIS committee within the All Hazards Consortium was created with me as chair to take on the task of developing and maturing the ORL model from a concept into a usable framework for determining and communicating how operationally ready data is. So to date, as you can see on the slide, the GIS committee has approved the first draft of the model and has also put out a number of other products. For example, we've developed and tested out several use cases like damage assessment and lodging. We also have created a database or spreadsheet that essentially has been serving as a working document for authoritative data sets, mostly weather data, but there's also been some other data sets in there. And we're also working on some executive decision-making dashboards that will focus on data sets that are ranked at an ORL 1 so that we can have full confidence in the data within those dashboards. And we're currently also developing a ranking tool using a software called Survey123 from Esri that will be a super easy form that can be used by any user to rank a data set. And it's simple, yes or no questions, super easy to use. So just some benefits of the GIS committee and the work we've been doing. For Blue Sky, a lot of the work that we do has helped with disaster preparation and the preparation of these new GIS standards. But for Dark Sky, it allows for better regional info sharing and communication when there's an actual incident going on. It also reduces delays and enhances decision making with better data. And so the goal of our group is to enable and empower better data-driven decision making with the ORL model. So Tom, I hope that's a good summary of where we are and where we're going.
Yes, thank you, Carrie. I put up on the screen, for those who don't know, this is a 10-step. If you answer yes to all 10 on the left, you're a 1 and you're reliable. If you say no to anything, you're a 2, and so forth. A 4 would be crowdsourced data, not reliable, but if you have nothing else, that's okay. You can use it, proceed at your own risk, kind of thing, right? The challenge was you can't tell by looking at a dashboard what data is in it and how reliable it is, right? So Carrie picked that up. Carrie, I'm really excited about the group, and we've seen the utilities involved really like this as it goes forward. This group, again, it's only 9 months, Carrie, right? It started in January.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, and Greg, I think we're now working on bringing the ORLs into the DHS framework. You got a few data sets there that I guess are.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to that, and understand that this is just, I've been very involved in a lot of the DHS data framework efforts, and this is just one small piece of the puzzle to help operationalize a capability that we can leverage as a watch operation. So looking forward to it.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Any comments for Carrie and the GIS committee? John?
Tom, I got comments, right? So, and it, the world for me, for an emergency manager is strategy, operations, tactics, and then granular, right? And so we've been talking tactics, and this gets really granular, right? And I have so much respect for Carrie and what these experts do. But to me, if you talk strategically, why this is important, right? If you go back to this notion of coordination, right? If you go back to this notion of enabling effective action on the ground, enabling operations, there's some prerequisites for it, right? And the first is that you have convened the stakeholders. You have you have that team on the phone or in the room, that everybody that has an ownership stake in the problem. That's step 1. Step 2 is that you can share information, and the SISE is that key, right? If you get everybody in the room and they can't talk, it's wasted effort. And step 3 is situational awareness. If you don't understand what the problem is and where the problem is and how big the problem is, and you don't understand what everybody is doing to contribute to the solution, right? If everybody's in theater, they're in the field and they're stepping on each other, or there's gaps and there's overlaps. So situational awareness is this key prerequisite to effective operations. And that's why this is so important, because this is what that provides, that situational awareness that allows you to make good decisions in a room like this that have outcomes on the ground. And so, and I think it's worth pointing out that, the people on the phone, the teams that are convened, step 1, able to share information through the SISE, step 2, have situational awareness through what Carrie's talking about, step 3. That's everything. You've got the whole solution there. It's just about growing it now. It's about, this is the how, Tom. This is the how, right? You can move a mountain with this construct. Literally, you can change the game. You can change the course of a disaster response with this kind of coordination.
Thank you, Kelly.
Kelly,
go ahead.
Tom, if you don't mind. John Molnar with the AHC. Our trip to INL brought out the real how, especially as we were looking to see how to incorporate this into the DHS. Where's the catalog? What's the taxonomy of that catalog? Which data do we deal with first? who is actually analyzing this data. Is it Carrie's group? Is it a mixture of DHS and the working group? Who does that? How does it get represented on the situational awareness tools? So, I mean, I'm way down in the weeds. I realize that, but that how to pick up those leads, Kelly, is now where we're in the meat, processing plant. Right now.
And so that's a key, John, right? Because, and this is, I always, the strategy, ops, and tactics, the ultimate strategic level is the public, right? They're the ultimate boss. The mayor is the boss, but the mayor serves at the will of the people. So if you've got all this data, you've got this tremendous data store, and then you've got an operation on the ground that's not working because you can't access that data, that's a huge problem. That's worse than not having the data in the first place, because you had it and you couldn't use it in a way to make decisions. And so we have to work those problems out in advance, John. And the way to do it is to keep convening these teams around these scenarios where you need these operations and work all that stuff through, because it's able to be worked through. You just have to keep at it, right? It's sort of ditch digging, right? It's hard work, but you can't try to do it in the job. A lot of it does happen in the job. A lot of it happens overnight, where people really do these sort of heroic efforts to get this data going, but it's a lot easier if you do it now, right, in advance.
So the story behind this was simple. The private sector was getting data. They couldn't tell what was good. The ESIP partnerships were sending them, we got this one data set. It was really great. Ground moisture, right? Very important to the electric sector. If the ground's really, really wet, poles fall easier than when it's not. But we couldn't tell if that data was, what is it? Well, it's not really ready. It's not really ready for operator use yet, but we need another couple million in 3 or 4 years and it'll be ready. And the operator got off the phone and called me and said, well, why are we even looking at this, right? We couldn't tell. It looks like good data. So Carrie and her group have really come around this. And when you look at, I'm just looking at a dashboard here. This is all the state 511 sites are merged into traffic. Usually you have to go to state by state. Now it's in one dashboard. It's ORL1, meaning the states own this data. This is their data, and it meets the 10 steps, right? So we have one dashboard now that tells us anything we want to know about live traffic. This is an example. This is a feed. There's a company that's merging these, right? All we had to do is find the company, but we didn't know who to find until we had the use case, and we didn't know any data. We wanted the best data, ORL1. See how it works? So to the decision maker, this happened behind the curtain, but it is hugely valuable in the decision process to know you're standing on solid ground, right? And to my knowledge, this is the first standard that has existed within the GIS community. So when we share information with DHS and they share it back, we all agree, I know what one means. They know what one means. See, that's not there today, right? What do you mean it was updated last month, after the decision's made, right? So, Carrie, thank you.
Tom, can I just add one?
Yeah, please. Yeah, Chris. Introduce yourself, Chris. I want to make sure.
McIntosh, co-chair of the GIS committee. I've met many of you. Thank you for having me. When I first saw the ORLs, what excited me was I've been in operation centers that handle situational awareness, usually one of two ways. Either if the data is not absolutely authoritative, nailed down, completely vetted, if it doesn't check every box, they won't use it, or it's a free-for-all. And there's no in between, and the decision maker in the free-for-all EOC doesn't know what they're looking at, and there's lots of examples of bad decisions being made because they didn't understand the quality of the data that was being presented. You don't know, is this authoritative or is this being created by somebody in their dorm room? And that happened, one notable example in Haiti with search and rescue data. It happened, a guy in a dorm room got data into the decision tree that was used to dispatch a search and rescue team on a snipe hunt. So the ORL construct, while we talk about ORL1 is absolutely great data, the real exciting thing about it is it's a way to tell the non-GIS practitioner what they're looking at, and they can use it based on that knowledge. So all those data sets that fall in the middle are now usable because you know what you're looking at. Instead of having an EOC that discards a gas buddy, which may provide valuable context, but it's not authoritative, or is throwing crowdsourced data in as authoritative, and a decision maker doesn't know what they're looking at. So that, to me, is the exciting part about the ORLs, is it allows us to grade data sets and present those to Kelly, and he can make decisions from an informed position based upon the level of the data that's being presented. That's the game changer, in my opinion.
So this afternoon, we're going to spend 60, 90 minutes on this topic for the ORLs, right? So what I wanted to make sure I asked the advisory committee, any comments or input to Carrie or Chris on the GIS committee? Okay. So this is really important when we start doing cross-sector dialogue. We all have to know, is it a potato or a potato? There can't be any difference, right? So when we mix rail and comms or food and fuel, right, we all got to know what a one means, right? And so you'll learn about this afternoon. So, well, Carrie, I don't hear any inputs or recommendations, so thank you. So we'll hear more from you. We'll hear more from you this afternoon. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you. Okay, last we're going to cruise into lunch here on the path forward. We've got some highlights, but want to talk about three pieces here. One is our partnership with DHS and Idaho Labs. Jay Robinson, okay, and Greg and Bob were looking for ways to sustain the progress. We had many discussions about it, and we had our kickoff meeting with INL, and they were elated. The meeting went very well. They need our help as much as we need theirs, if you will. Smart people. They do a lot of really high-end technical stuff. They love the ORL concept. I think it's fair to say they like the SISE work group, the ability to pick a problem, add people, then bring in the data, and then bring in the technology and the data. So I think that's going to be a big opportunity to sustain work, right, and grow a little bit, which is great. Bob said today maybe there's a committee to work with commercial, transition. Maybe there's an opportunity to do that, help DHS pick those solutions that align with use case issues. Doesn't matter what sector, but there's an opportunity and funding for that, which we may look at. And many of you may or may not know the consortium board voted in the summer to establish a new applied operational research institute, focusing at the private sector in order to bring in their projects, their resources, so we can match this up at the federal level. Okay. Lot of interest on that. I've had a conversation with the board's had a number of conversations around that. This, I think, we're still shaping. Laura Shepis was very interested in this. Kelly was kind of running point from the All Hazards Consortium. I was asked to kind of pull that together, and I could tell you I don't know much about it, but I'm going to learn quick. But what I've learned about that from the advisory council is institutes work with institutes. It's interesting. There are 4 or 5 massive ones like Battelle, right? But then they work with other ones who work with other ones. It's really an interesting opportunity there. So we're going to explore that as time goes by, how we structure that, what are its focal points. Laura recommended, well, you're going to need a couple projects. Why don't you take this cyber state-private coordination as a potential initiative for that? So that's, we're looking at that. The second one is, how can we replicate Persia, right? How can we replicate her and Mike Sprayberry? Because Persia couldn't do what she does without Mike's mindset of, man, just open it up. Don't worry about what they see. Mike's mindset about this was so important. But there's a training academy, training something with that. I think the private sector would love to see that, because what we've learned watching Persia is they have a good program, they have great leadership, they got innovative entrepreneurial thinking, and they get hammered every year. What about states that don't? What do we do there? What is the use case in a state that doesn't get hit all the time? What's the connection to the private sector that'll build the use case that the private sector can find? There's issues, but classic emergency management is kind of locked into a natural disaster, and Persia doesn't necessarily do that. She has 600 plus members in her organization. They're working all kinds of stuff all the time. So I want to just kick this around with you all as far as potential projects or other initiatives we can see the Institute working on, or if there are other areas of focus the Institute might go at. So 2 paths forward: continue our partnership with DHS, which would include really federal agencies, DOT and DOE and others. and a private sector initiative using the Operational Institute. Any initial thoughts here?
You said more Persias, Tom. I don't see more Persias.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna as we go.
I mean, I think you know, and so it's my my pet peeve is this issue of coordination and how it's invisible to people. People assume that it happens. They think it's organic. They think a lot of people get in a room and they're gonna self-organize and they're gonna make stuff happen, and nothing could be further from the truth. When a lot of people get in the room, especially in the early minutes of a big job, it's almost always gridlock, and it's a painful time. It takes a long time for those groups to self-organize, and way too long. And people like Persia, and that's you know, that human factor, but it's a bandwidth. It's a Persia class bandwidth that we have to create. So we need a lot more Persias. It's people, and people are expensive, and you know, so it's resources. You need resources to bring people and build the team bigger and keep doing what Persia's doing, you know, more and more and more. But you know, you need to shine a light on that. You know, it's so many times I get these calls from people and I get these emails and they're like, I got this tool, I got this application, and it's going to save the world, right? You don't need people. You just need a better tool, and that's crap. That's just absolutely nonsense, right? There's plenty of tools out there. We just need the people to convene the people around the tool and work the tool in a job, whether it's the real job or a simulation, and you know, build the capability of the people to not only come together, but to use the tool in the job. And that's the game. That's the game we're in. But it's like you said, it's a people problem. You know, it's a people. As long as we don't invite the lawyers in the room, we're going to be able to do a lot of stuff. No, we have to invite them in, but we'd have to so answer their questions just enough to keep going.
Sidebar, right? Sidebar, right. So this is kind of white canvas for the Institute. It was designed really to help further research and commercialization, but I think there's many other opportunities to find technology, to bring it in, to align it, if you will, with that. So I want to just get perspectives from some of you that are on the phone or in the room. I'll just go around. If you have any, feel free. Dave, I'll start on the bridge. Dave Vanderblom, any thoughts or perspectives or potential issues you'd like the Institute to focus on?
No, Tom, I think that where the group has gone, and I mean, it's made tremendous progress, and I'm looking forward to see it develop more use cases and align this technology so that we can all work together across the sectors. Appreciate it.
Okay, very good. Jeff Dorco, welcome. Any thoughts or input?
No, just Johnny come lately to this, but love the discussion. I think we're our azimuth is good here, and like I said, just like the comment, more use cases, and I'm sitting here drawing up all sorts of stuff on a piece of paper. Alexandra's going to love me by the time I connect with her.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. I forgot one idea that came up was if we could better package and communicate our use case development process and have 100 organizations using that same process, right? You could scale that way, right? Because it's all down to the problem solving, right? And I wrote that up there. Very good.
Carla Gammon.
Carla.
You were talking, or the group was talking about convening people, and the academic universities have the ability to convene people where it keeps us kind of clean with acquisition and things like that. So example, MIT has the Center for Transportation and Logistics, MIT CTL. They have a disaster team that meshes very well with this organization. They can convene lots of different groups in a very simple manner to help us work on problems like this. Great,
Carla, thank you. Okay, so leverage academia research group. I just made a note of that. Thank you very much. Ken Buell, any comments or input for the committee?
No, Tom, not at this time.
Okay. Mike Sapone?
Good, Tom. Thank you.
Okay. Persia, areas of focus or potential opportunities you see?
I'm kind of happy with what we've got going running, Tom, but I'll keep thinking about it.
Right. Well, at some point, I would love to talk to your boss about maybe housing that liaison training in your state.
I'm already working on him. I'm already working on him, Tom. I'm working on him.
Okay. I mean, you might as well, take the mountain to Muhammad, they say, right? So, perfect.
Tom, there's a corollary to that training, and that's training for the private sector, because I can speak personally. We are in a one-to-many, and each of the states has a little bit of a different setup. Do they want a physical presence or a virtual presence? And especially for us in critical infrastructure, do they want us to engage in ESF2 or ESF14 or both? And are there differences in how we should engage with those two communities? So I think there's a good opportunity to strengthen the coordination in that way as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Rob Glenn, any thoughts, comments, or focus areas that you see?
I'm gonna pick up from where Persia was, and I think that there's a good head of steam within this group. I mean, I think all the priorities are right. We're all talking around the same thing. So, for example, we're looking at the guidance, that we're reviewing, and it goes right to what Kent's talking about, and that is, how to negotiate that from a private sector perspective, just as much as we need to build the state capability. So, I think that there's really good alignment between this group and others, as well as between private and public sectors. So I think, the key for 2020 is how do we keep up momentum, and how do we keep each other in the loop as we continue to do the work that we're doing.
Okay. While we're on the topic, does this group need to meet more often virtually? And right now we meet once a year. So as things heat up, maybe we look at doing something a little more frequent. Okay. Anyone on the bridge want to provide comment before we go around the room? Okay. Let me start. I'll just go around the room here. Greg, we'll start at your end and work around. This is really open. We're looking for areas of focus or things that are problems that the Institute might take on as a project or as an initiative.
So just to build on previous conversations, the data thing is it's too big to chew on. So we've taken this use case type approach to, solve some of the operational problems. And I think that's a great approach to that. So we've done that for the situational awareness part of this. Maybe there's an analytical part we can kind of start building on and prototyping to leverage maybe some of the tools that we've got that INL's built and, move out from there. But I think that might be a good kind of pilot to take on.
Okay. Yeah, every time we talk cross-sector analytics, the people just we can actually do that, Yeah. Okay, Kelly?
You're going to let me talk, Tom? I think, ESF 14 is, what is it? Cross-sector. You just said cross-sector. It's got cross-sector in the title. Was it cross-sector, public?
Community lifelines.
Community lifelines, sector leagues. This is the ESF 14 right here. This is the, SISE's got it. I know we're working closely with them, but this is the how of ESF 14, right? You got a brand new ESF. That's the biggest change in NIMS in, I don't know, a long time. And here's an opportunity to make it work. But it's going to take dollars. And the scope is huge. You're talking about 50 states. You're talking about a federal government bringing that all together. So you just got to build that team bigger and bigger. But you have an opportunity, I think, to really get it right.
Okay. Well, the good news is Rob, Matt Wambacher will be here later. Bob, they're really front and center. Rob especially, they're working on this for a long time. Rob Glad on the phone. So I think it's a great leading forward here. Doug?
And so in support of a lot of what I've heard today, I love the private sector training, awareness. awareness for the private sector on the ESF 14. That's what Chad and I spent a lot of time doing. They're all hearing it for the first time. Oh, what is ESF 14? What do you mean we're a part of a strategic plan now? So you spend a lot of time on educational awareness.
Mm-hmm.
In the process, you're talking about a lot of use cases, and in some instances we find, and selfishly we find, some of our members are resource constrained. So we spend a lot of time developing best practices as well. And I would use North Carolina and Persia and in the work that everybody's doing down there as a best practices to how do we respond and recover from a crisis. Things just move more quickly down there than they do in some of the other states. So is there a way, not only as we're training the liaison, but we're sharing what are the best practices, what are those methods that they're doing that get business up and running more quickly that can be then adopted into other states? It goes in the use case somewhere around there, but building the best practices out of that as you identify the use case.
Yeah. Okay, great. Carla?
Thank you.
From a FEMA only perspective, I have money, but I want speed. And so I think the way to have speed is to identify partners and earn trust, and then communicate frequently. So, we know Doug, we talk to Doug, and then we exercise together where we can when there's not a natural disaster. And as far as all the tools, I wholeheartedly, in a way, disagree. I think it's all about people, and then processes. How can I get speedy processes? And only then do I really want a tool. I mean, I'm going to call Doug on the phone. Doug, what do you want? What do you need? And then Doug will say whatever he wants, and we'll work on the process, and then I might look at a tool. So lots to think about, but I want speed from my chair, and I want trusted partners that I communicate with frequently, exercise together, and people and processes. So my little short story, we're working on Maria in Puerto Rico. We called 2 medical oxygen companies on the island, and they both lied to us for days and days and days. And we said, we cannot fly medical oxygen. It has to go on a barge, and it's 10 days. Do you need any help? No. No. Yes. Oh, okay. So that by having trusted partners communicating, that would have been so much simpler. So we have some partners that we don't trust. So we've seen both sides, but the trust part is super important. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Ken?
I think I've already said it all, Tom.
Okay.
So great meeting. Thank you.
Okay, great. Tom?
Thanks, Tom, very much. I think one of the challenges you have with ESF 14 is a gap between the policy pronouncement and actual practice. And there's a couple of areas from a private sector perspective where that gap is particularly substantial. One of them is we talk in terms of community response, which is what ESF 14 is about. And yet often a substantial part of that community in the private sector is ushered off to a county courthouse or another long line at a state to get a pass for access and reentry when they're looking to respond and get their resources and people into storm-affected areas. And so we can't possibly have a whole community response. We can't possibly have a strategy under ESF 14 if a part of that community is relegated to, well, you just follow the state-based practice. But the federal officials are just walking right in. State officials are just walking right in. But and a couple of sectors, the electricity sector, I think rightly, the communications sector, they have very good partnerships. Government's giving them good entree. But beyond that, the other sectors are left to their own devices. And so they come up with different workarounds to try to accomplish this access and reentry mission. And it becomes a challenge in 2 respects. One is, while I am respectfully approached DHS and FEMA have instituted with the community lifeline sector, I think that's a sound foundation with which to day-to-day ensure that we're beginning to restore the right capabilities for support of immediate relief and long-term recovery. But storm to storm, there are particular facets in that affected area that elevate other sectors to primacy. And yet often we don't seem to have that flexibility to recognize that early on enough. And so we've had instances where chemical plants in the Houston area became at substantial risk of fires and explosions because the materials had been untreated for so long. Why? Because their employees were waiting on a long line with Texas authorities in different counties to get access to those areas. Well, now we're creating another problem for the community, which is in addition to all the dislocations from the hurricane and its effects, now we have the potential for a fire and explosion up the street when my husband works, maybe, or my wife works, and what are we going to do when that happens? So we got to have flexibility in understanding that storm to storm, there will be certain infrastructure sectors that elevate in importance simply because of the nature of what's happening in the impacted area. And access and reentry procedures that are more consistent from state to state. Very good point made earlier about the stratifying effects of state boundaries that are more consistent. You've heard me on the phone repeatedly advocate for access and reentry consistency. Why do I do that? It's not to undercut the prerogatives of the states, not by any means. But I think we have to recognize that the level of response that this nation now coordinates when these events happen dwarfs what was taking place even 15 years ago. It is impressive to see people show up at a shelter. They're not just getting to stay at the shelter. They're being handed bedding, toys for the kids. There's a play area set up. There's food galore. I mean, it's incredible. That all happens because of the work that gets done between industry and government in discussions like this, in coordinated effort with DHS and FEMA. But for all that to work on a sustained basis, you've got to have the foundation so that there's greater consistency. So we're looking to upset what the states do? No, what we're asking the states to consider is that because of that level of response we accomplished now, and I've got experience with this. I lived in Northwest Florida in the 1990s. I was assigned in the Air Force there. We had 4 hurricanes in my 4 years there. There was no response from the federal government to those 4 hurricanes that we saw. And I was on a military base, which is run by the federal government. Today, when those hurricanes happen, this mass influx of people and resources occurs to alleviate the effects on that community. And it's a credit to everybody involved that it happens as it does. But it can happen much more efficiently and much more effectively if we recognize that in many cases, the state did not write its statute with this massive influx in mind as part of a response to a major disaster. And that very often we can come up with ways to approach this problem or actually alleviating burdens on the states. I can't imagine how difficult it must be to work in a state emergency management division. In addition to all the other things you've got to worry about, you're also somehow having to process these requests coming from all these different organizations that are looking in good faith to support the community response effort. So again, no one is looking to upset the state's prerogative in this area. What we do think is attainable is an approach that considers the different procedures states apply and produces an outcome that pays deference in some way to those and gives you a consistent manner of indicating this is a response to this disaster. Now, why does that matter? It matters for the example I gave that in some cases, if employees don't get in early enough, you can have worse disasters. The other is, we had this challenge come up. States do a great job with their governors early on initiating waivers of different requirements so that truck drivers can get in and exceed hours of service and other regulatory restrictions to make sure that they are supporting the response as thoroughly as they can. But having that happen just in an impacted state and a bordering state isn't really the right solution when the materials are coming from all over the country. And so again, if you had some sort of a consistent access and reentry process, if you had some sort of consistent indicator, a letter, a placard, something that the truck driver could show to authorities and allow them to speed on their way within speed limits, you'd be able to facilitate that response a lot better. And we've had plenty of examples in the private sector. When I was privileged to be chair of the cross-sector council, we had sector representatives who'd say, I'm trying to get stuff down there, but it's coming from Michigan. And it's got to go through 12 states to get to Florida. And each of those states is imposing its own restrictions that pertain for our operations. So again, access and reentry, some greater consistency in an approach would also allow those other states to recognize that these vehicles are being used as part of the response effort to a disaster in a state in the southeast. And so while they're coming through our state, it's for a very specific purpose. Now, like anything else, is going to be subject, no one questions the need for periodic inspections to ensure this isn't being abused. But I think those are areas where we've got to close that gap. ESF 14 talks in terms of a unified response, but we've got to get closer on the execution. Right. I think on access and reentry, which would then support some broader application of waiver regulations, that could be very beneficial. And then just one more, two more points. One, you had a very good discussion on GIS data. This has come up in the private sector presentations a lot. This particular GIS data that's of value to different sectors. The Department of Energy does a great job of getting the right information to the electrical utilities And that prompted us during Hurricane Florence in South Carolina to ask, well, if the Department of Energy can give that information to the electricity industry, why can't that information be given more broadly? The answer we got was that the lawyers in the federal government agencies that own that data have to approve its sharing with the private sector, to which we responded, okay, we get ready for hurricane season every August 1st, or every June 1st. Why can't we, in advance of June 1st, get those waivers in place so that when the need is there, the data can flow? I'll give credit to the Army Corps of Engineers. In the midst of Hurricane Florence, they just released their data. They put it online. That data was particularly beneficial because there was a unique facet of that storm where most of the heavy rainfall happened inland. And all that water eventually had to go back out to the coast. Well, if you're in the critical infrastructure sector, you're trying to decide where should I put my people and my resources as part of my response effort, where these water flows might create new flooding 2 or 3 days from now is vitally important to know. So again, as a preparatory matter, I think the DHS and FEMA did a better job for this season than they had in the past, getting those waivers of whatever the legal requirements are for legal review of access to this data. That's important. And then I think the last one from our vantage, and I think it ties in very well with what you're trying to accomplish with SISE, and implementation via ESF 14. What's the playbook here? Ask anyone in the private sector if they know how the decisions are made on who participates with speaking roles on the phone calls, how those selections are made. And the answer is most of them don't know. I don't know. When I was the head of the cross-sector council, I spoke all the time. Now the head of the cross-sector council doesn't speak. I speak from time to time as a spokesperson for the transportation sector, but that's not consistent. And one of the things I noted for the 2 significant storms we had this term is you had a lot of gaps where critical lifeline sectors had no spokesperson, which meant whoever the designated person wasn't available. Well, who's the backup? Well, there wasn't one. So we don't even know what the playbook is in terms of how all this gets organized. What's the determining factor on what shows up on the FEMA DHS dashboard? Great platform. Private sector loves it. You get raves across the board. Why is that a good tool? It captures information in a single place, easily followed. You pull up what you need. It's all there. I think a lot of the SISE work would plug in nicely there. There should be an All Hazards Consortium SISE segment of the DHS FEMA dashboard where you could access this whole range of GIS and other resources that SISE puts together. So if I had a suggestion for DHS and FEMA on how to present the dashboard, integrating all of this to a very prominent segment is important. But what's the determination on what gets on there and how? And what are we doing call to call to ensure that the important information is highlighted in a way that those who are asking the same questions over and over again are getting answers? I can't tell you how frustrating it is to sit on those calls and hear the same question asked every day. And either goes unanswered or there's a referral to, well, send me an email. Well, no. An email from one person to DHS and FEMA is not the answer. Because everybody on the phone call is interested in the answer to that question. So they're going to ask it again tomorrow. Why? Because you didn't tell them the answer. So, this gets into kind of a chief of staff type function for the DHS FEMA participation. But I can tell you that if I were the person on those calls every day, I'd be jotting down notes. And those questions that come up over and over again are going to be top center of what we talk about the next day. Mm-hmm. And even if we don't have an answer, we're going to say we're still working the issue. But those 3, 4, 5, and often it's the same questions over and over again, and they keep coming up because they're not being effectively addressed. They're not being effectively addressed not because people aren't acting in good faith. There's lots going on. But somebody needs to be the quarterback to say, hey, I heard this thing 3 times today on this call. First thing we're talking about tomorrow is this subject because it's important to everybody. Now, I don't know if any of that fits into the path forward for the SISE, but I sat here and took in the very good comments earlier, and I thought it would be important to give a broader private sector perspective from the role I formerly played as head of the cross-sector council.
That's great. No, I think it's safe to say that's going to happen, and over and over and over again. I think you're right. So I love the process part, Tom. I mean, you ran it for a while, right? And you asked a really good question. And I think the private sector, if we've answered that question once, everybody ought to know it and know where to go to get it. So you have one place they can all, and it's hard because people are busy and it's just difficult.
And that's important. I mean, I have emphasized, particularly my colleagues in the rail industry, if you're concerned about whether you're getting a timely answer, it's not because of a lack of good faith. People are doing the best they can. There's lots going on, and I understand that. Yeah. But in the course of all those people who are involved in managing those calls, there should be someone who's kind of taking this quarterbacking function to say, let's make sure we cover these 3 or 4 issues because they keep coming up. And if we don't address them, we're not playing the role that this whole process with the dashboard and these daily phone calls is intended to play. So thank you.
Awesome. Sherry Stone, I meant, are you with us? Can you hear me?
Hey, Tom. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. We hadn't had comments from the fuel sector here, so I wanted to make sure I had you chime in.
Well, I just think what SISE is doing is, there's so many wonderful opportunities, and really happy to be working with this group. I agree with what was just said about better, coordination and information about access and reentry, especially for our drivers getting into disaster areas. That would definitely speed processes. There's information needed about when TWIC escorts are available, because during an emergency, we may have people coming from areas that, they never need a TWIC card. So they, so they're going to try to help out. They're going to go to a terminal at a port, and they just need to know that there's an escort available, because it varies from port to port. And that's an issue that I'm hoping we'll be able to work with you on as well. But I think this group is just, it's wonderful, and so much has changed and so much has gotten better, and we all really appreciate it.
Okay. So last committee, Chris, you're the last committee member. Comments? You're leading us into lunch here.
Well, that was my comment. Lunch is served. I will not keep you between you and your baked potatoes.
Can I
yeah,
put one thing?
Sure.
This is John Molnar. I'm the director of the Program Management Office. But in working with Tom over the last 15 years, one of the things that I always wake up in the morning, sometimes in the Homeland Security Emergency Management space, and I feel like I'm in the chaos model, to be honest with you. There has to be 50,000 opportunities to move things forward. And I always tell Tom, I can't go to the private sector or to any of our constituents with a blank sheet of paper. With everything that's going on, just to go with them and say, tell me your problems, I think that's unfair, especially as it relates to all the work that is already being done with the private sector and in collaboration with the private sector. And DHS has some key projects that I think we can move forward with that includes all of our sector partners that they have already collaborated with these people, be it the RRAP process. How do we operationalize some of the things in the RRAP process? I don't know. I don't know how we can get the data. I don't know how we can, how are we blessed to be able to see it? How are we blessed to be able to move forward with some of that? How are we blessed to be able to take it to the next level with our private sector partners? I don't know, Tom, but I think maybe this is one of the areas. The whole initiative now, the DHS is moving forward with the prioritization of the critical functions. Well, what are the, if you have 100 and you pick the top 10, DHS, what are your top 10, DHS? And can we align and see if our private sector agree and maybe pick 2 of those and utilize those as use cases? I don't know. That it just helps with me not to go forward with a blank sheet of paper with all the millions that have been spent on the forefront to help us move forward into the operationalization, bear with me, of those types of activities, and how could we become relevant by moving those things into the next arena. So that's all. I'll stop with that, but I think that's a critical juncture that this research component can move some of this forward.
Good. We're going to pause for lunch. So those of you on the bridge, we have a new bridge number. I sent it out. It is not the same one. So when we hang this up, it won't work anymore. So check your email. If you don't have it, send me a text. We'll start that right about 1 o'clock. Okay, so we'll break for lunch, and we'll see you back about 1 o'clock. This afternoon we have tech discussions and demonstrations on our ORL standard and our dashboard. Also, the technology we're using to actually connect the SISE to the NIPP and show you some of the data sets and information we're sharing to coordinate. And we hope to get our states connected into that as well. So we'll bridge the final, the golden cup, right, is getting states, feds, and commercial entities on the same page on a few things. All right, that's it for now. We'll see you back at 1 o'clock.
Lunch is back in the next room. Make your own. Make your own bacon. Just shake anybody's hand. My hand is so cold.
Okay.